Hello. One of my favorite authors of all time is F.W. Farrar, Frederic William Farrar. This is his book, The Witness of History to Christ. Farrar also did one of the most famous biographies of Christ, along with Edersheim's Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah, probably the most popular life of Christ that was attempted in recent centuries. Farrar was also the chaplain, one of the chaplains to Queen Victoria. So there was hardly an intellect in the English-speaking world that was more respected than Farrar in the Victorian era. He wrote this book, The Witness of History to Christ. He was an Anglican clergyman and felt it his duty to defend the cause of Christ against the assaults of unbelief. He was not a conservative in terms of his views Scripture, so he got himself in a lot of trouble from his fellow Anglicans in the Darwinian era, in which he wrote this, by the way, the Hulsian Lectures for 1870. This edition is The Witness of History of Christ, 1883, so it had gone through several editions already. And Farrar therefore had opposition on the right, and certainly had a lot of opposition on the left, because he stood for the historical traditions of the Church, the eternal verities of the Apostles' Creed, in the face of the first wave of Darwinist resistance. But Darwin wasn't the bigger problem. The bigger problem at the time was not evolutionism, the philosophy derived from evolution, but rather unbelief on other grounds. The intellectual tide was, you might say, many-headed. So when he's dealing with the objections to Christianity, as he found them when he was a youngish man, he talks first about the moral causes of that. That is, the morality of Christian was rejected, and that, of course, gave ground to assaults from various angles, i.e., no one wants to think they're rejecting ethics or morality because of their own moral situation. Everybody likes to think they're rejecting Christianity and other absolute claims for other reasons. And so he deals, after dealing with the moral causes of unbelief, he deals with the assaults of Christianity from the intellectual side. And he says this: there are assaults upon Christianity which have their ground in philosophy, in science, and in historical criticism. It's not easy to encounter them, because once, like the tents of the nomads, they were shifted from day to day. But now the very frequency of their intrusion has won for them, among too many, the position of scattered indeed, yet tolerated settlers, so that now it seems as though, against the doctrines, and above all against the miracles of Christianity, there were, so to speak, a conspiracy of silence, an agreement of contemptuous indifference, as though forsooth it were too late in the day to argue or to refute, and it were at once more effectual and more courteous to ignore. For instance, the central doctrine of Christianity is based upon a miracle, and in no small realm of literature, the impossibility of miracles is calmly insisted upon as a discovery which needs no demonstration. Their invention is attributed to an imaginative reverence, their reception to an ignorant credulity, the present belief in them to the cant of an interested hypocrisy, or the deficiencies of intellectual gifts. And are we timidly to admit these haughty assertions? Are we meekly to bow before the intolerant dogmatism of an ignorant science? Are we, the successors of those who overcame the world, to accept the patronizing condescension which is willing to spare our venerable prejudices? Nay, unshaken amid the storm of contemptuous assertion, we reply that it requires a loftier height of intelligence to believe in miracles than to reject them, because it involves the realization of loftier than mere material verities, and the recognition of wider than purely physical laws. And can it, we ask, be so decisive a sign of contemptible inferiority to hold a faith which was dear to the heart and acceptable to the intellect, I will not say of a Milton only, or of a Bossuet, but of philosophers and mathematicians, of biologists and astronomers, of a Leibniz and a Descartes, of a Haller and a Pascal, of a Copernicus and a Kepler, of a Bacon and a Ray. have we, in the last century, discovered laws so far more general than the law of gravitation, than that the belief in prophecy and miracle, which was natural to a Newton, should be so driveling in us. He's alluding to the fact that Isaac Newton, of course, the discoverer of the law of gravity, was far more devoted to the study of prophecy, biblical prophecy, than even to his science and mathematics. And then he alludes to the recently deceased Michael Faraday, who was another great name in science of the 19th century, who held to his Christian beliefs despite his prominence in science. And he says, with so many supreme intellects still among us, speaking of scientists, and he doesn't name Kelvin here, but he might as well have, that is Lord Kelvin, so many over whom the grave has recently closed, like Faraday, let all at least that is shallow and noisy in modern atheism learn the humility of science and the calm dignity of unshaken Christian faith. So those men that he's just named had no problem with reconciling what they knew of mathematics and science with their Christian faith. I'll put a link into a series we did called Why Jesus?